And welcome back to another Hyomoto and Julien podcast period of time. I'm Hyomoto.
I'm still Julien.
Uh-oh, I think you broke your mic.
Oh no, did I?
Okay, you're good. I don't know why. I didn't hear any of that last sentence. Um,
I'm still Julien, even though it's been quite a while.
he is. You'll recognize him from previous podcasts and possibly community posts. So today's podcast is going to be a little eclectic. We're just going to kind of chittity chattity chats. We were having a conversation earlier, and I want to get some of it on microphone because I thought it was pretty good. But the vague topic will kind of be technology in games. Um, as a little bit of background on myself, I have played thousands of video games in my life, and I have a collection of over 1,500 of them. I own several systems, and so once you've played so many games, you end up with a huge repertoire of knowledge and experiences and this and that. And so a lot of times I'm seeking out some of the weirder stuff just to, I don't know, cleanse the palate, if you will. I was telling Julian that there's a game that's been re-released on Steam that came out a very, very long time ago, like during the PS2 generation. I'm not going to bring it up. I'm not going to talk about what it is. You can guess
Oh,
what it
just
is
gonna
I'm
look it
talking
up
about.
again.
But it is kind of funny because you're like, why? Why is this getting a re-release? Of all the old games that maybe deserve to a second lease on life, why this one? One of the things that was kind of fascinating is, especially with indie developers and AAA, you see this distinction between the technology that they have available, and a lot of that's based on their goals. The one that I started with was No Man's Sky. When it had first launched, and its core premise was procedural generation. It was these procedurally generated worlds and planets and stuff like that. And my controversial hot take for today is I don't like No Man's Sky. I think it's a worse game today than it was when it
That's
launched.
yeah, okay. That's the hot take. No one likes No Man's
Yeah,
Sky.
that's my spicy take. But I have a reason for it. It's not that I don't think it's technologically impressive. It's that the initial premise of the game was to go out and explore all these foreign and unique worlds and just discover stuff in the cosmos. But outside of the massive graphical overhauls that the game has had, there's very little new stuff to actually go out and find in the universe. In fact, a lot of the game has been focused around sending players to very specific locations, like their bases or the Nexus, their freighters. Take your pick. But and on top of that, most of those models have been in the game since launch. Most of these locations and things have been in the game for a very, very long time. I don't mean to complain about that, but what I mean to say is that every time they add new stuff to the game, none of it really seems to be built around that premise of going out and exploring and finding new and unique things. They seem to be, at best, going out and finding very specific new things. A good example would have been like when they added the mechs. Yeah, that's cool that you get a mech, but there's no new gameplay that came out of the mech. You just now have a mech that you can walk around in. It's fine, I guess, if you like the game, but to get back to the original portion here, the technology behind the game was based on procedural generation. And so what they built around that was this system that allowed them to very easily slot in new content. But in a way, also kind of tied their hands because in order to really add new content to the universe, it makes it difficult because it would regenerate the entire universe. Anybody who knows a little bit about procedural generation, Julian, what's your experience with proc gen?
I love and hate it because it's funny because when you have infinite, like practically infinite, I think how many quintillion possibilities are there in No Man's Sky for a planet to
They
generate? I
say
don't know.
18 quintillion, but I'm sure it's a little bit more specific. And plus, there's
Yeah, it's
multiple galaxies, I mean, universes as well. So it's even higher than that.
it's practically infinite. No
Yeah,
one's gonna discover all the
it's
galaxies.
infinite enough.
And I think the funny thing about procedural generation is you have a ton of possibilities compared to doing something the traditional way, where you design a level, you can maybe crank out 100, but you cannot physically reach that same number of levels. But the funny thing is, even though you have procedural generation, everything will somehow end up feeling the same, looking the same, and kind of playing the same. And I think, at least in the early stages of No Man's Sky, I don't know how it is right now. I think that was like one of the main points of critique too, where the
Yes,
game was
there's this
even
old
though you had
criticism of Minecraft, which I think fits well here, which is, uh, why do you do anything in Minecraft? Like, where do you go to any biomes? Now, Minecraft's gotten much better at this, I'd like to point out, but when it was new, why would you go to another biome? Pretty much everything you could ever need was located anywhere. It wasn't until they started adding, the special, like jungle temples and the underwater temples and shipwrecks and treasure maps and all these things that basically gave each biome something unique about it that gave you a reason to seek it out. Before that, yeah, there was no reason. That was a big problem I had with not Terraria. What was the one that was aping Terraria? Starbound. That has got to be the most boring game I've ever played. So I'm going to make somebody angry with that. But the problem was there's no reason to go anywhere and see all these infinite permutations because there's nothing new everywhere you go. And that was the problem, I would argue, with No Man's Sky. But that wasn't its initial premise. And that's not why I think that it sort of failed on that. It was that as they went along, one of the biggest changes that I find to be highly controversial was they changed the progression of the game. When you first,
oh, did they?
when that game first launched, your first task was to do a bunch of like mediocre crap. I mean, they weren't great missions or anything, but basically what they did was they got you in your ship into space and teleporting and basically flying off. Now, here's the thing. All this stuff has now been added, but it also got combined together. So what you ended up with now, if you were to crack open a brand new game of No Man's Sky now, the game takes hours to get to that same level of freedom that you had within 20-30 minutes originally. It has you grinding out base building. It has you grinding out freaking ship acquisition. It has you just grinding out stuff. Go find this. Go build that. Wait for this to process. Fly over there, build 6 of these. It's just like at no point that was so anti to what the whole premise of this game was, which was to go out and find stuff. Instead, the game is now spending all of its time telling you to do these very specific tasks in very specific locations. Now, one of the things that's funny about it, though, was that in order for them to really add to the procedural generation of that game, it requires them to break everything. I think they found a way later on to serialize the planets, which allowed them to kind of change stuff without breaking everything. But that's why any of the major updates that had a chance that people's planets changed, because the procedural generation changed, right? It wasn't that they changed the algorithm. It was that they added more stuff to it. And with more stuff being in there, it just wasn't going to produce the same result. Whether it be land mass or, trees, density, atmosphere type, whatever it might have been. There's ways to get around this. But kind of to drag this back to the beginning here was not to pick on No Man's Sky. It's that a lot of its decisions were based around that they wanted to make this procedural game. And what was interesting was how it sort of tied their hands. Because now they can't really make a really tight story game. Because there's nothing hidden to find. Yeah, there's rare planet types. But there's billions of them. Literal billions of these planets. Like even if it was less than a fraction of a percent of the planets in the game were this rare type, it would still be billions. And you could find 2 of them in a row right next to each other. It's just, that's the nature of procedural generation. And yeah, I really like their technology though. It reminds me of a different game, which Starlink. Did you play Starlink?
I don't think I've played it.
Starlink is what I would have loved to have seen No Man's Sky become. Minus the toys to life angle.
Unfortunately, you can only really see the whole Starlink Wi-Fi system.
This was made by Ubisoft, if I remember correctly.
Oh, that one.
Yes.
Yes, I did want to play it, but I never did because it was so expensive to get into.
If they had they made the Switch got a Star Fox version, And that was the only version I played because I don't see why you would bother playing the other version. You ever like why this probably doesn't happen a lot, but I have nephews and nieces, and if you've ever been sitting watching children's cartoon programming, at least in the United States, um, there's most of it's awful. I think that's true for most entertainment, but there's like this. Every show is trying to make these cool, relatable, likable characters that you'll care about and tune in each week to find out what they're up to. And that's what Starlink did. It was like, hey, check out these cool 92'd, kids that are. And I'm like, can we just with Star Fox, it was like they're Star Fox. They're gonna go fight Star Wolf, and they get to fly around and do these missions. I don't know. I just felt it worked a lot better, and it was a lot more fun. But like, it wasn't procedurally generated, but it had some of the same technology that No Man's Sky had, in the fact that you could fly down from the atmosphere to land on the planets. Weirdly enough, it was sort of a. It was very Ubisoft in the sense that you had to take over outposts. Because, of course, right? Like, of course. It's an Ubisoft game. It's mandatory. There's got to be outpost takeovers. But it was kind of cool because you could, I believe you're kind of like a la Star Fox. Your ship could turn into a tank. And you could do, like, ground combat, and then you could take off, and you could do, like, air combat, and then you fly into space, and then you could travel between the planets. And I like that. And I think and that's kind of what I'm hoping out of No Man's Sky, is that people will take kind of what that game represented. Because here's my big complaint about No Man's Sky. I mean, I have thousands of them. I really don't like this game very much. I've tried it. Trust me, I got 240 hours in Steam. I've tried to enjoy this game because it has something I want, but unfortunately, it's not done in a way that I enjoy. And that thing is that exploration bit, right? That ability to fly between the worlds, to get your own ship and customize it, and meet alien species and stuff like that. And I thought, and where it fails is in the game. Like, for example, combat has never been updated. There's somebody that's going to complain about that and be like, yes, it has. No, it hasn't. No, it has not been meaningfully updated ever. The same Sentinels that were in the game at launch are in the game now, and that is still the entire enemy force. In fact, if anything, one of the patch notes for No Man's Sky was they actually reduced the amount of Sentinel activity in the universe because they're so unfun to fight and uninteresting and boring and repetitive that they were like, and at this point it's like they might as well just take combat out of the game. They're not doing anything with it. They're not improving it. They're not adding features to it. I mean, it doesn't even seem like the audience wants it. And so, okay, then why do we have this vestigial limb, hanging off the side of this thing? Why are we putting all these resources and, into something that only 6 people are using? If we're not, or to put it a different way, if you're not going to make it awesome, then why even bother? They built you this big stompy mech, but is there any other big stompy mech to fight with it? No. It's just, it's another thing to throw on the pile. To stop picking up. Oh, go ahead.
I think that's a good point with if you're not going to make it awesome, just why are you doing it? This is the one complaint I do have about Doom Eternal. And you brought that up too when we talked about it, like in person,
yep,
a few minutes ago. But like the main issue is, for me, there's these huge action segments. These are fun to play. They're really awesome. They can be very frustrating too. And then there's these really strange platforming segments. You have to take your time and reconsider. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of them. They're like, parts of them are too long, or like sometimes the solution is not too visible. I got really stuck on one puzzle, and I had to look it up after I was stuck on it for 30 minutes because it wasn't.
Which is always that's like the most fun outcome, is when you have to actually, when you're like, screw it, I'm just looking it up. I'm just looking this up. I've had that happen before where recently I was playing Ninja Gaiden 3 Razor's Edge, and I was pretty sure I knew how to beat the final boss, but the last boss in that game is amazing because not a single frame of it is enjoyable. They've managed to make a boss that is so unenjoyable to fight, it actually made the rest of the game less fun by comparison. It actually retroactively sucked my goodwill out of that game. Uh, but I had to look up a video because I'm like, there's no way this is how you're supposed to beat the boss, because it would be the most tedious, unfun possible way to beat this boss. And wouldn't you know, yep, that's what they want you to do.
Actually, now that you bring it up, that's a second complaint I do have with Doom are the boss fights. Because Doom, to me at least, what I played from it isn't about fighting one singular enemy. It's about shredding through hordes of enemies.
Sure, yeah. Even original Doom
And
had a lot of that.
and like the last boss fight I did was the gladiator boss fight. He has this huge shield, you know? There's one before where the enemy has a shield again, and I think all boss fights have a boss with a shield so far. And it's just really unfun because you cannot shoot at the boss because he has a shield and the bullets will be deflected. And it's just a single enemy, so you constantly have to focus on that single enemy. You can't heal, you can't like replenish ammunition.
Basically, all the other mechanics that the game's built on pretty much fall by the wayside.
Exactly. And like it's a cool mechanic. It's expected of a game to have boss fight kind of. But it shouldn't be in there in my
You
opinion,
know, and
because
that's
it's
kind of the
just not
interesting thing. I had
perfect.
heard a complaint by Ben Croshaw about original Doom 2016. He was like, oh no, they've spawned, 2 Barons of Hell. I'm gonna have to call upon all the skill that I just exhibited 5 minutes ago. And that's the kind of thing, is that
Yeah.
you would want the boss fights to test something, right? To throw the player a little bit off kilter and test something new. I've mentioned this before, and again, I am a huge Doom fan. I love the original game. I still play it to this day. I like Doom 2016. I mean, hell, I don't even hate Doom 3. I get way too tense playing it because it's a horror game. But I did not like Doom Eternal at all. There's parts of it that I think it's really well made. It's just that what it's trying to do, I don't enjoy at all. And it's funny because, like, you talk about the traversal side of things, and I would argue, yeah, that's part of it, because what are they even in there for? Like, it's kind of cool for secret hunting to get, like, one-ups and stuff, but, I mean, outside of that, why is Doom Guy jumping across pits and stuff, dude? Like, what is... narratively, maybe it's neat, but, like, in terms of playing the game, it's just an extra button push here or there to get, like, because let's take the most obvious example. What happens when you fall down a pit? In Doom Eternal, what happens when you fall down it? When you miss the
You
jump,
don't even die, you just respawn and
you just
a bit
teleport
of
to the
health.
nearest ledge. So what skill is this trying to test of mine? It's testing my patience, but that's not, generally speaking, that's not the best way to test the player's patience in a game. And it does break it up. Like, I think they had a really strong design vision with Doom Eternal, but I think they just went too far with it. Like, this puzzle combat idea is cool, but they basically built it so it feels like you have to go into each encounter and be like, okay, I shoot this guy, jump over here, chainsaw that, grab this, use my blood punch, hit that with the... And you just... For me, I'm like, all I'm doing is babysitting ammo counts and cooldowns. That's what it felt like to me. That's why I didn't enjoy it. Is because when I play Doom... Okay, so there's 2 mods that I like to play. I like to play Brutal Doom, but I play it on Tactical Realism Hard, which basically means you die if you get shot. But it's this fast-paced, horribly frenetic game where it's like the enemies go down in seconds, you go down even faster, and you just tear your way through these maps, or you die. And it's kind of like Hotline Miami for Doom. And then another one I've been playing a lot recently was Zage Mod, but I play it on Ultraviolence Fast Monsters. And it just, again, it creates this absolutely just brutal, fast-paced. But I'm not babysitting cooldowns. I'm like, where are the monsters at? What weapons do I have available? Can I throw a grenade? Am I in range of the explosions? Are there barrels around? I'm constantly looking for tactical solutions. And also, I like to kind of speedrun it. So, it's like, how do I get through this faster? What can I skip? Is that going to bite me in the, who do I have to kill? And I enjoy that a lot. So it's not that it's technical that bothers me. It's that I think it's just too technical. Like, here's the example of what they did wrong in Doom Eternal. the very first upgrade you get, I believe, or at least I did, was a chain gun barrel for your shotgun. That is awesome. I mean, seriously, that's awesome.
I think you can choose between the chain gun and the grenade launcher.
Yeah,
but
you
I'm
can
not
pick
sure.
one or the other, and I picked the chain gun shotgun because, I mean, that's awesome. What's cooler than a shotgun? A chain gun shotgun. But your starting ammo is 20. Is 20. You run out of bullets like that, and then you can't use it anymore. You gotta switch to another weapon. You gotta use your chain. It's like, dude, let me shoot at the enemies, please. Like,
You gotta switch your weapon and switch to the second chain gun you have.
yeah, you gotta, and you're just constantly changing your. And I just don't enjoy it. I mean, because when I'm playing like Zage mod, I choose my weapons based on what the outcome I need is. How far away are my enemies? You know, what order do I need to defeat them in? Is it more important that I defeat them quickly or that I, am suppressing them? But in Doom Eternal, it doesn't feel like that at all. It feels like you use the weapon that you have to use, and then you swap to another one, and then you babysit your cooldowns. And I just didn't enjoy it. But to speak on his positive notes, I mean, it's very well designed. I mean, they definitely pulled off what they were trying to do. There's no doubt in my mind about that. Like, I don't think the game's badly made or broken or anything. And the technology behind it kind of makes me mad that when Bethesda bought up id Software that they stopped. Because up to ID Tech 4, id Software always open sourced their engine code. But once Bethesda bought them, they stopped doing that. And it's too bad, man, because they're hell of engine makers, man. Like, they really are. Like, Unreal, whatever. Because, and we mentioned this before, like, Doom Eternal will run on the Switch to my PC, and they didn't do that by necessarily turning off all the graphics and making it look like potato mode. They did it through, like, really clever resolution handling and just great use of texture and memory management, which, speaking of which, is something that Julian's super into right now.
I'm actually not. I hate it. But,
He's
yeah.
His latest joy is data-oriented design.
And I'm kind of forced to write a very fast 2D render pipeline, and I'm trying to draw everything in batches because that's efficient. That way, the GPU can instantiate all the meshes and their materials, and like instead of kind of drawing all things separately, I draw them all at once. But that brings the problem if I draw all things at once. I can't draw the same material. I need to draw the same material at once. And if I draw the same material at once, I can't depth sort for different materials because I'm drawing them all at once.
Oh, yeah.
And then I have to introduce layers. But now I still cannot depth sort even if things are in the same layer. So it's either below the thing or above the thing. And it's a pain. I am still trying to figure out a solution, but I don't think there is one.
And it's interesting because, to look at Doom Eternals, a lot of people don't notice this because they do a good job of hiding it. But how many enemies would you say are on screen at any given time in Doom Eternal?
30 at max.
Yeah, because when you're fighting, you'll fight, dozens or hundreds of enemies, but how many of them are actually, in the level at that given time is actually pretty low. And I would also argue that a certain amount of those are what I would call low processing, like the zombies and stuff. I don't know what their proper name was in that one, but they don't have a lot of complex AI or movement pathing or anything. I mean, they tend to seem like they stay mostly in the same spot till you kill them for health or armor. And yeah, so that kind of cranks up the number that are on screen. But, in reality, it's like they do a great job of making it feel like you're fighting, dozens of enemies, when in reality, I mean, I didn't end up finishing it, so maybe later fights feel like more chaotic, but oh, excuse me. But it felt like there was like 6 to 10 on screen at any given time.
Yeah.
And that excuse me. And that's something that's kind of interesting is we can draw that back to No Man's Sky. Like, it uses a really interesting way of batching together those kinds of calls. If you look at the world, you can see that it will be simulating everything that's around you within a certain radius, but it's not necessarily doing any advanced calculations on that stuff, like terrain, interaction and animation and stuff like that, until it's within sight. And so when it's on the other side of the hill, or because like sometimes you'll be looking through your visor and you'll see like the little dot that says something's there, and you're like, there's definitely nothing there. It's just a dot, But then you get closer and it's like, there's your animal. And they did a really great job of like really large animals, much further out. Small animals, yeah, they don't draw them till you're basically snorting them. And and that's one of the things that I did like about No Man's Sky was, if you've ever watched any of its technology demonstrations, because Sean Murray gave a lot of talks about procedural generation and such, and he has a lot of granularity in terms of detail. I I kind of hate that a lot of the time, because you ever play Rage?
No, I did not.
Rage had something called mega texturing, which was the entire world had one texture instead of having, basically artists could paint every pixel on screen however they wanted. But what it meant was when you spun around, you could watch the textures pop in, because it had to unload the ones you weren't looking at and stream in the ones that you were. And that's a big problem No Man's Sky has with its procedural generation, is you're constantly hitting the boundaries of what's been loaded in very easily. And it was pretty funny, because there's only a couple games that I've upgraded my computer for, because I very rarely play games that really require me to have a super advanced computer. But No Man's Sky was one of them, because I was wondering, like, hey, if I get a super fast SSD and I have this top of the line GPU and CPU, can that go away? And the answer is no. It's just, I guess it's endemic to the engine or something like that. There's a lot of interesting little visual quirks like that. And to kind of draw this back to where it was sort of originated from, was, a lot of those decisions determined how the game could be built. Like in Doom Eternal, and they may have like 20 or 30 enemies on screen at a time. I'm honestly not sure. It doesn't feel that high, but they do a really good job of hiding it, as I said. But yeah, it's like, Doom Eternal will never be like 100,000 man RTS where but then you take something like, what's that program where you just make battles like that, where you're like 60 Tyrannosaurus Rexes versus 1 million chickens, who wins?
I think you mean, what's it called?
I'm forgetting it right now.
A totally accurate battle simulator.
Is that what it is? Yeah, that sounds right.
I think so.
I wanted to say Battlegrounds, but I wasn't sure. And kind of here's the humorous part about that, is they built this engine to do that. But because of that, they're never going to, they're not going to do procedural generation. They're not going to have a Diablo-esque ARPG added to the side of it. And this is kind of something I was talking to Julien about before this started, was, we don't often think about how the technology we choose factors into the project we want to make. They say often. I meant to say we don't always. and that's what's kind of interesting. That's kind of why I wanted to talk about these different games a little bit. And you can see how, it's the chicken or the egg thing. How much of them is a product of what they wanted to do, and how much of what they did was a product of what they had to work with. Ninja Gaiden. I played through Ninja Gaiden 1, 2, and 3 again recently, hence my hate for that boss. And Ninja Gaiden 3, similar, but Ninja Gaiden 1 and 2 especially, were unique for their time because they were console games that ran at like 60 FPS. And that was a big thing out of Ninja Theory. It was like Dead or Alive. Again, was like a game that ran at a much higher frame rate. And they managed to accomplish that by doing away with a lot of modern flourishes, like like complex shaders and stuff like that. But what they did instead was actually what Nintendo is really good at, which is using the right level of detailed textures and, you know, the right number of polygons to make it appear like things have more complexity that you might normally see people get by using shaders, you know, bake in the light maps, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so you have this game that looked very good and it ran very well, but it's undeniably, it looks very different than, say, Gears of War, because, you know, they're using different technology. Also, interestingly enough, Ninja Gaiden is another game that cannot have a lot of actors on screen. In all three of them, there's rarely more than like, and I don't think it's a limitation of technology. I think it's a limitation of the game would be absolutely infuriating to play if there was like 20 people on screen. It's like, it's just kind of an interesting, you know, limited not by the technology so much as just that it would not be any fun to play. Yes, Julien was playing Doom Eternal recently. I've been playing.
I'm still playing it.
Dozens of weird games. I was playing She Will Punish Them. Not a lot, but I thought that one was really funny because Steam's every once in a while I like to browse the adult section in Steam and just see what's in there. You know, because I played like Honey Pop, and I actually thought it was pretty fun, or at least I thought it was really funny. I don't know if I thought the game was fun. It's match 3. But it was hilarious. I never laughed so hard playing a game because it was just completely dumb fun. But then you have things like House Party, which, I mean, I've seen some videos of it, so that's good enough for me. But point is then there's this She Will Punish Them. So there was a company that made Agony, right? And Agony, the people who made Agony, they went on, right now they're working on a game called Succubus, which, I don't know, man. I couldn't tell you what it is. But when I saw She Will Punish Them, I was like, is this that game that they were making as a sequel to, or not a sequel, whatever, the next game from those people that made Agony? And the answer is no. It's like an ARPG with a heavy emphasis on lingerie models. That's pretty unique. And so, humorously, their technology, and it was made with Unity as far as I can tell, but they put all this time and effort into like the lingerie and the character models and the lighting. And funnily enough, and I assume these are just assets that they bought off the Unity store, right? They made the lingerie, sure, but like the levels and all this other shit, definitely just crap they got off the Unity store. And because you could tell where the priority was, right? Like this side, they clearly put lots of work into, and then this side, copy paste like a mother. But it is funny that it's like the ARPG is. It would be rude to call it Dark Souls-esque, but it's clearly trying to be Dark Souls-esque. It's not, and it actually reminds me more of Dragon Age Inquisition. In that you have all these like really excessively over the top attacks that don't do any damage. It's like to cast magic, I think you like hold down Alt and then you let it go. That's got to be the weirdest button combination I've ever used for casting magic at something. And yeah, that one's funny because there's a couple other things too. Like I don't know if you're familiar with like point light sources, but games will like the characters will have an artificial light source around them. And that's to kind of bring out details in their features and stuff like that. And this one has one for their butts, which I just thought was hilarious. I'm like, of course they have a butt point light. Why wouldn't they? Gotta make sure to show off them curvaceous bottoms.
Yeah, I think that's a very important thing, though, because, well, maybe this is a funny example, but why not polish the part that you want your players, like the part of your game you want your players to play, or the reason rather why players are playing the game? Why not polish that? Because it's the same with Minecraft. You can like Minecraft is, I feel like subjectively I mean objectively, it's a bad game. It's fun to play and I like it, I enjoy it, but it's a bad game. if you're thinking about the term game,
Oh
but
yeah, I can. It's a mishmash to be sure.
yeah, but why are players playing it? Because of the crafting and the building, and well, actually not because of the crafting, it's in the title, but no one likes Minecraft because of the crafting,
Yeah,
but rather because
that is true.
of the building. No one likes the mining either, and they try to change that with like most recent updates being caves and cliffs.
Did they?
But
I gotta look into that.
yeah, they changed the way caves were generated
Oh
because
yeah,
with
yeah.
the new
Sorry, I thought you
updates,
meant just mining in general.
no, because with the new updates, they introduced the problem. You didn't have to go mining anymore to be like to reach any goal in the game because you could just find diamonds in chests. That's
That's what I do. So
objectively
yeah.
that's objectively since like finding diamonds is the end goal of the Minecraft core loop. Well, not anymore, but
At least in terms
it
of the
used to
equipment
be.
progression.
It
The
used to be.
yeah, now they
And
have the netherite.
yeah, I actually like that, but
I thought
either
it
way,
was so funny when they did that because there's if I were to pick my favorite aspects of Minecraft, it's how frustrating of a game it is. And when I say that, I don't mean to play. It's a very cathartic game to play. It's very fun. But it's that it would be so okay, just look at the mods. That's all you have to do. How many mods add 6 different types of shovels, right? Like, it would have been so easy for them to do that. But they have absolutely refused to add any new weapons or tools or armor into that game since, like, forever ago. Instead, they're like, we're going to do bees, right? But over time, 10 years later, it is this really densely packed game that's just like and that's why the netherite made me laugh is because they still technically didn't add in new weapons and armor. They just said, okay, you could take your top tier weapons and armor and make them up one more tier than they were before. It's just like, I just don't know that I would have gone that way. And so it's hilarious that or like new animals. It would have been easy for them to be like, look, we're adding 16 types of new birds or something. But no, instead they're like, nope. Eventually they added fish, right? Eventually they did, and they got around to it. But there used to be nothing underwater.
yeah, but I think that's kind of the point. It's a bad game. There's like objectively, purely objectively, there's no goal. Well, maybe defeating the Ender Dragon, but who plays
Yeah,
Minecraft to
it
defeat
could.
the
I
Ender
think it's
Dragon?
important for a game to have
Speedrunners,
an
but
end.
that's it.
But yes, most people aren't pursuing that.
Like most people, they keep playing after the end. In fact, the game really starts after you defeat the Ender Dragon. At least for most players. And matter to the fact is, it's still objectively a bad game. You don't have a core gameplay loop because you decide that core gameplay loop for yourself when you play
Yes,
the game. And
I want to.
and the
collect
reason
diamond
why
swords.
I like mod packs is because they introduce a core gameplay loop, especially the like big ones. Because now there's something like what I really enjoy. It's called Engineer's Life. You like basically progress through the ages. You have like stone tools, and you're in the Stone Ages, and then you start working your way up by like being able to melt metal slowly in a really crappy furnace, and you have to cast manually and everything, and you just slowly start automating. I like that because it introduces a core gameplay loop. But it's
Sure.
not Minecraft. It's not
I would say
Minecraft.
it's not a
It's
core
not the same game.
loop so much as uh, a more specific progression path.
Yeah, maybe.
Because
But
you're still relying on many of the same things that you were doing before. It reminds me of Factorio because I've never enjoyed that in Minecraft at all. I hate my mod packs like that, but I subscribe to the Ben Croshaw's theory that it's like a model train set. You go in there and you put in some new, whatever above the door. But at the end of the day, it's it's like it's like cutting a bonsai tree. But Factorio has also those kinds of mods, and I have played those with Factorio. And I don't know if it's the same experience, but it's like, man, it's like somebody was playing Factorio and they're like, you know what? This would be way more fun if it was tedious as hell. And it's like, and I have such mixed opinions about that because on the one hand, I do love that higher granularity of engagement, which again, is what you're getting on the Minecraft thing. But at the other hand, I'm kind of like, I think I understand why they didn't take this route, because it's like what if the same thing but way stretched out? Like
Yeah, it's kind of funny because little bit what it does is circle back to the whole procedural generation thing, because with Minecraft you have practically infinite possibilities
yeah,
that you can do
infinite
in a
resources
sandbox
even.
world. But like the one thing you don't have is a goal, and as soon as you introduce the goal, it diminishes the core game. It's like less of the core game than it was before, and it like maybe it grows more tedious. Maybe you have less options because suddenly there's less things to do because you need to progress in a specific order and have to fulfill a set of goals.
This is
But you don't.
sounding like why I hate No Man's Sky.
Yeah, but you do not have the full freedom anymore, because
That's true.
that's taken away the second you introduce like a set of goals. Defeating the Ender Dragon is one goal. It's
Hmm.
a single goal you have to reach, and after that, the game really starts for most players. So it's fine. But as soon as you introduce a set path towards that goal, like collect 10,000 dirt, otherwise you cannot open the end portal.
Stack that dirt.
You, the first thing you'll do is collect the dirt, because like you collect the dirt, and like one thing I like, I don't know who said it, but gamers will always take the path of least resistance. That means now they have 10,000 dirt, why not build a house out of your dirt? So you take away like the aspect of collecting more resources, because you have 10,000 dirt, you can just build whatever we want with it. But like kind of introducing that goal, you take away from the freedom you have.
And you bring
If
up
that makes sense.
an interesting point there was and I think that when we talk about the flaws of Minecraft, it's because that kind of undermines the central technological principle, which is the removal and addition of blocks, right? Because you can have 10,000 dirt blocks that you dig up out of the ground, right? And you're like, okay, well, dirt is fine. I can build a dirt house out of dirt, so why would I use stone? You know, and if you make stone too hard to mine, then suddenly it's and so I guess what I'm kind of getting at here was there's this mod that I was trying out in RimWorld, Kamigo's Trees, for any RimWorld players. And I like the trees, but it changes the dirt texture to the ugliest color green I've ever seen with my eyes. And it really is just out of place, and I don't like it. But that's not what I'm getting at. What I'm getting at is that that texture, as far as I can tell, was meant to solve an issue, which is that RimWorld has brown dirt. And so let's say I wanted to build like a town and have like a nice lawn out in front of the house. This isn't really necessarily a RimWorld-esque thing to do, but you can. And the question then becomes like, oh, it's not green enough. When I'm in the forest, it's not green enough. It's not green enough. This doesn't look green enough. And the thing that kind of made me laugh was, so that's their solution, right? Make the dirt green. But my argument is that if you want to fix that problem, you just need to make the grass more full, because there is grass in the game. But the problem is that you can easily see the dirt through the grass, and so it gives everything a very sparsely grass look to it. And so if I were trying to solve that problem, what I would do is go for more types of ground cover, more types of moss and, this and that. I wouldn't get rid of the dirt. I would just add other plant types to add to the ground cover. And I think that's what you see in a lot of mods, and like when we're talking about Minecraft here, is the pursuit of what I would call the most obvious solution rather than the most appropriate one. Because if I was going to quote unquote fix Minecraft, what I would do is I would go through the tools. Like think about gravel. Sometimes it drops flint, right? And that's not really what I want to say there. It's that the real issue with Minecraft as a game and its sense of progression is that because there's functionally infinite resources and they're incredibly easy to get, if you're trying to make a game with progression, you've fallen at the first hurdle. Because the core gameplay loop of those types of games is scarcity, right? And so what can Minecraft do to counter that is what you were saying. You need 10,000 dirt. It's easy to get dirt, so you're going to need to do 10,000 dirt. So rather than addressing the problem that dirt's super easy to get, and has all these properties that makes it as amenable as anything else to build with, instead we say, okay, we'll just do 10,000 of it. And that's what you see a lot in mobile games. I mean, granted, in this case, they're trying to get you to spend money on them. But yeah, instead of, going into the core and being like, well, instead of making you get 10,000 of something, maybe we just make it harder to get this. In that case, it's part of a psychological manipulation. But if we're talking about games that aren't literally designed to exploit people, we end up having a similar conversation about numbers, but with a little bit less darkness. Yeah.
And what I was kind of trying to get at is, you started mentioning is that the way we build our game engine, and for most game maker users, you don't build a game engine. But
not the core engine, but you still are building on top of that.
The choice of our game engine influences the way we build our games, and in the same vein, our game influences the way we build our game and our game engine. So when thinking about building a game, you need to kind of choose the appropriate tool for the job, because what I'm working on right now, it was supposed to be a very large multiplayer game, and it's like 40-50% done in Game Maker, except the whole networking part is not done. And well, it won't easily work in Game Maker because Game Maker is just not built to handle 64 concurrent players. Sure, you can do it, and that's the thing with any Turing complete engine tool set. You can do anything in it. It's definitely possible, but it's just a fucking pain. Why would I do that in Game Maker? So what we did end up deciding is that we will switch to Unity, because Unity has very nice networking frameworks. And while we're at it, let's go with the data-oriented technology stack, because then we can support a lot of things like grass plates that we each animate individually. And what we ended up doing is now we don't just want to support 64 concurrent players, because the data-oriented technology stack lends itself towards supporting a lot of things, and it also makes networking easier. So what we did was we still say 64 concurrent players, but also 100 AI agents, because that's easily possible. We just take basically the player, except make it AI controlled. It's not a huge deal. It's actually really easy in data-oriented design to do such a thing. But the fact that we chose to switch engine influenced that design decision to have more AI agents than before. In fact, I don't think we had any AI agents before, because the way everything was set up just didn't make that possible in a very clean way. It could have been hacked in, but it just wasn't possible before. And I think two important things are about that. What I just mentioned is that if we choose an engine, it will, or ideally it should, influence the way you build your game. And two, if you still have a mechanic you want, it doesn't have to be exactly the way you're describing it. It just has to appear that way. And one good example is actually my camera's turned the wrong way around, and it's just flipped in post-processing because it looks the same to you. So why would I just go through the trouble of putting it somewhere else and turn it the correct way if I can just flip it? if that makes any sense, because it just has to appear correctly to the player. It doesn't have to be the same.
For the viewer, Julian's
Yeah,
webcam is upside down.
exactly.
We
And
have
like
fixed it
you mentioned
in
that in
post.
Doom, you mentioned that in Doom, like there's maybe you feel like you're fighting 100 enemies, and that's true, but really you're just fighting 8 at the same time, and out of the 8, 4 are just standing there so you can kill them.
Yeah, and they might. Yeah, that's a good point. Is they may be low activity. Just this is something that's kind of interesting. And if I get to my chance to pick on No Man's Sky a little bit and also kind of speak well of Minecraft at the same time, was because they both have the same issue, but Minecraft seems to have done it a little bit differently. Uh, Minecraft's enemies all serve a purpose, which is kind of why it took some restraint. Like, yes, many of them were the process of accidents, like the creeper was because they had used the wrong axes values for the pig and this and that, and they decided to make. But the creeper's goal was also kind of to keep nothing sacred in the game. The creeper blows up, takes part of your base with him. It expresses this idea of impermanence. You have the skeletons. They shoot projectiles at you. They're a bunch of douchebags. I hate them. And then you have like the zombies. The zombies, they're not threatening in and of themselves, but if they surround you, they could push you into arrows. They could make you fall. There's things that they all serve this purpose. And to go back to the No Man's Sky example is like, what do the Sentinels do? What is their job? Like, what is their goal? Because think about if we look at Minecraft, like zombies chase you, but where are they chasing you to? Nowhere. They're not chasing you anywhere. They're just chasing you. They're pushing the player. In No Man's Sky, like you're being chased by the Sentinels, but they're not chasing you anywhere. The only thing they're trying to do is get close to you. And most of the time, like if we were to talk about the zombies only show up at night. Right? Night's dangerous. That's when. But in No Man's Sky, the Sentinels just show up whenever you're just doing anything, really. Just to harass you lightly. They're not incredibly threatening. They have very low damage rolls. You can ignore them almost entirely if you're playing on a normal difficulty. It's just like, but what experience were these meant to give the player? And whatever they intended, they just end up being annoying. Like zombies, yeah, they're annoying, but they're also kind of terrifying because you're like, oh, there's a zombie, and you're like, oh, screw that zombie guy, and then you turn around, oh, there's another one, so then you're like, I gotta move, and then you get hit with an arrow. Suddenly things get really tense, and you're like, what's happening? That you get the and you're like, oh god, you just run, right? You just go a direction. You're like, away from the sound. It creates this experience that the game is trying to push on you. Most people don't know this, but or they don't think about it this way, but Minecraft is a horror game. It really is. I mean, the daytime, what is it there for except to just make night all that much worse and to make caves and everything? Because I don't think I've ever played a game that made me crave the light more than Minecraft. I'm like, I'm headed to the surface. Enough of this crap. I'm tired of every single corner trying to kill me. You're building these long hallways of torches and stuff like that because you're just like, no darkness down here. No, you're building like checkpoints of doors and stuff just because sometimes enemies seem to randomly spawn in lighted locations. You're like, oh, is there a creeper in there? Oh yeah, there is. I knew it. I knew there was going to be a creeper in there. Like the piglins, and you're like, hey, get out of my way, and then suddenly they're all attacking you, and you're like, well, this is horrifying. The Endermen, where you're just looking around, you look over there and just happen to catch one of their gaze, and now suddenly again, horror game. You're involved in a horror game as something is harassing you constantly with horrible noises, a gnashing of limbs and arms. And yeah, and that's and it is kind of funny because No Man's Sky has tried to introduce some of that horror-based stuff to it, but the game it wasn't built that way. It was originally this exploration game. That was the technology they built it with. And it will be interesting to see, because despite my hatred of it, I still have given every patch a try. But I will be interested to see whatever this new update they have going, because if there's one thing I'll give them credit for, man, those guys know how to update a game. I sure, they haven't impressed me specifically, but I mean, look, if you thought you didn't get your money's worth when it was at launch, you certainly at least got it in terms of pure man hours spent updating that thing. I mean, they've redone the graphics pipeline 3 times. What? I mean, at some point you kind of have to be like, all right, you guys might be misaligning your priorities here. You know, do we really need to update the graphics again? Okay, I'm just going to put this out here. If they update the graphics with this update again, I'm going to laugh.
I mean, they earned so much money from
No
Man's Sky, from the sales.
Well, and they're also
I think they're just doing what they enjoy doing.
Yes, they're also a very small team, and they can get away with it, right? And that's what's also, you know, if we were to touch on a little topic here, why is Call of Duty so expensive? Well, it's because Activision has hundreds of thousands of shareholders that all want a piece of that Call of Duty pie, right? You could pretend like they're paying their employees, but sorry, they already spent that money. That's not why there's microtransactions in Call of Duty. Activision Blizzard makes so much money that they could afford to release Call of Duty for free and keep all of their employees on the payroll without charging for microtransactions. It's not a good business model, but they have that kind of capital. They definitely do. No, that's because they have hungry shareholders that need to be paid each cycle. Hello Games, on the other hand, I don't know how many work there now. It was 20 when No Man's Sky released, I believe. And yeah, and Julian's 100% right. You know, and that's what's kind of interesting about Mojang, because the Java team, Microsoft didn't break them up. They didn't reassign them. They didn't make them work on the PC port. They still just work on the Java version. And they have been for 11 years now, 12 years. Like, I mean, man, if you want to get into the industry, whew, that's what you should be aiming for, because that's a good gig right there. You know, someone like Hello Games, you know, they made a lot of money off of No Man's Sky, so now they can kind of just do what they want.
About $80 million.
Mojang got bought. Yeah, I mean, you know, that wouldn't be nothing for Activision, but if you're 20 people,
for a team of 20 people,
yeah, you can all now retire. It's fucking,
pretty much, yeah.
Some good investments, you're done. You're retired. And obviously their further patches have, you know, brought in new sales as well. To pick on a different game, Valheim. That game made like $15 million out of the gate, and I think the developers, there's only 4 of them. So I think they all went on a party for like forever. And now they're just trying to convince themselves that they still want to work out. I think that would be my problem. I don't judge them at all. If I released some indie game into early access and I made $15 million, I'd probably be like, well, the next update's going to be the final. This is going to be the last update. Sorry, guys. I'll release the modding. You know, I'll release the source code. Screw it. It's open source now, baby. I'm going on vacation. I don't have...
Actually, I think if I made that much money off of an indie game, I'd still continue working on it, except just less and whenever I feel like
it. Yeah, I would become one of the modders for my own game, you know? Like,
pretty much.
You're like here's the source code, because Valheim, thanks to Unity, and I guess because of the project you're working on, this might be relevant as well. Modding for Unity has really come a long ways. Like Harmony.
I did not know.
It's crazy.
I know that you can decompile Unity games really easily.
Yeah, and there's entire toolkits that allow them to basically replace the Unity DLLs with these moddable ones, and you can create mods for games that were never intended to have mods. And not just like, oh, I changed the graphics, but like, I added new gameplay mechanics. That's what happened with Valheim. Valheim they didn't release modding tools for that game. It was just that it was so Unity, like, it was not a custom Unity. It was so Unity that they were able to just, I forget what the heck the toolkit's called, but they threw that, and they added like just brand new mechanics. They added quick slots, equipment slots for your stuff. Somebody built an entire new loot system for the game. It's just like, yeah. And apparently part of that's because you can actually decompile the code and be like, oh, okay, I'm going to replace this method right here. And there's like patching it's crazy, man. Freaking I've never liked Unity because I don't know. Apparently, it's easy to make bad games with anything, but I think Unity is excessively like Game Maker Studio. You kind of get a default performance package out of. You don't generally get better, and you don't generally get worse, right? It's kind of hard to get outside of this envelope. I mean, yes, you can write a program that doesn't run, put an infinite loop in, but I mean, generally speaking, it does a pretty good job of taking whatever the hell it is that you threw at it. I mean, Victor with Nyan Ryu, his Nyan Ryu script is like 40,000 lines. The other day, he told me, he's like, my game takes a really long time to compile. And I was like, it's because you have like 40,000. You have more lines in one of your actor's state machine than I do in my entire engine and game combined times two. That is insane. Freaking my buddy Oz is like that too with Final Fantasy Renaissance. His state machine for his battle system has 10,000 more lines in it than my entire version of Final Fantasy has. It's hilarious. I'm just like, but yeah, Game Maker lets you do that pretty easily. It does a great job of handling it somehow.
I think that's the worst thing ever because no matter what you do, it's going to be slower than just drawing it default.
Yeah, but Unity feels like its default is bad performance, and then it takes effort to get it past that. Like, because man, I've played so many Unity games that run like crap. In fact, that's actually kind of how I can tell when I'm playing a game made with the Unity engine is when it just doesn't run right, and you're like, oh, this is made in Unity, definitely. An indie game that it doesn't matter what it is. It could be 2D, 3D. You just get like this bad performance, and you're like, oh, this is a Unity game, I bet. And then the big giveaway is obviously texture or graphics quality, fantastic.
Yeah,
whatever that means. I guess they
actually for 2D games. It doesn't change a lot. It's just that people probably don't remove that thing.
Yeah, no, they don't. And yeah, so, the fantastic. I've always said Game Maker Studio you can spot because the crash dialogue. That's how you know it was Game Maker.
Yeah.
The Unreal you can tell because every game ever made with Unreal looks the exact same. It's really weird. Go back to the Xbox 360 generation if you don't believe me. Every Unreal game looks like every other Unreal game. It's almost like they were sharing graphic designers. I think it's because Unity was billed as a AAA engine, right? So if you were getting it to use all these bells and whistles, and so you used all the bells and whistles, and your game looked like every other game that was made with Unreal.
I would say the same about Source, like Valve's engine. But then I found out that Titanfall 2 was made in Source.
Yeah, can you believe that? I
had expected something like Unreal or like a custom engine, but no, it's Source.
Yeah, and Rare in that sense as well. You can kind of tell id Tech engines from their texture work because they use a type of... Like I said, id Tech 4 supported mega texturing, and I think the latest versions still support that. But it means that you have this... it means it does a lot of texture, like MIP mapping and stuff. I don't really know all the details because, again, they're not open source anymore. But if I understand it from what I'm looking at, they use a lot of tricks to basically... they lessen the resolution around the edges of the screens is a feature that's in all the id Tech engines. Textures, the faraway textures are always lower quality than the upper, and they do a great job of like streaming between them. But because of that, you get this kind of texture feel that I feel like you don't get out of other engines. It's hard to put your finger on, but that seems to be its indicator. Although nowadays, what are the games made with id Tech? Wolfenstein and Doom. Okay, thanks Bethesda. I appreciate it. Fucking Christ.
But I forgot what the engine Warframe was made in is called. I think Warframe 2 is like one of the least fun games, except it's awesome at the same time. But it just looks really, really pretty and performs really well. I could run that on like it looked amazing on
probably a custom engine then, if I was to guess.
Yeah, it's I forgot what it's called. but it's really like it looks fantastic, especially like even on low ends.
Oh yeah,
Um,
it's kind of the thing about modern games in general is even on low graphic settings, they look pretty good.
yeah, it's called Evolution. Yeah,
Yeah.
but anyway, like the thing is, and the reason a lot of studios have their own engines, like Ubisoft has a custom engine just for Assassin's Creed, and they built a multiplayer first-person shooter on it. But that's a different thing.
I forget what the hell their
Um,
engine is called. I know it, but I forget it.
I
I was
think
just reading
Anvil
about this the
Next.
other day because I
I
thought
think
they
Anvil
said they were
Next is
actually
another
going to
studio.
drop that engine. I'm not sure because EA is Frostbite. They got it when they acquired Dice, and it was used for first-person shooters, but multiplayer first-person shooters no less. And over the years, they've kind of made it a more general-purpose tool. But it's almost funny that you could tell it was made with Frostbite because it doesn't work well.
Yeah, it's called Anvil, the Ubisoft engine.
Anvil, thank you.
But anyway, like the main reason studios use custom-made engines that they spent hours and a lot of money developing is when you have an engine tailored to specific needs, it's going to outperform everything that you can have for that specific niche. It's going to work for the specific niche. It's not going to work for anything else, though,
I
or
will
at least it's
actually
going to be
disagree
difficult
with you
making
on
it
that
worse.
one. The reason why EA shifted to Frostbite, for example, is because they didn't want to pay Unity licensing fees. Because EA used to use Unity. Was when they acquired
Yeah, but
Dice. They said, "Hey, can we turn this into?" But otherwise, I do agree with
that's
what you're
EA.
saying. Is you end up with an engine that's very specialized. That's why Dice built their own engine, was because at that time, when Battlefield was new, 1947, back when that was the new game, but there wasn't a bunch of multiplayer games that supported, like 64 people on a map. That was, we didn't have Battle Royale like it was today. That was a thing. That's how it got popular, was because it was a multiplayer game that just had this huge scope, and it had vehicles and all this sort of stuff. And so when they took Frostbite and they started transferring games like FIFA to it, what are you even transferring, right? Maybe the animation system, maybe the graphics pipeline, but there's so many problems with that. And historically, that's what happened supposedly with Mass Effect Andromeda. Was their engine team was too busy making loot boxes for FIFA, and they just didn't get any support for it. Oh, no, 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 sorry, Anthem. That's supposedly what happened with Anthem. Was The other part was true. They were too busy working on loot boxes,
Oh,
and
that's hilarious.
and yeah, and that's one of the reasons why there's a lot of reasons why Anthem was a boring, dull, lazy, mostly because it was in development for 10 years and they had made no progress. And then EA put out a trailer for it, and the team that was making Anthem said, "Is this what we're making?" And and so then they made that, but they didn't really get any help. It's weird to think that EA wanted to make this live service game and they just didn't put any resources into it. Like,
Yeah.
it's such a weird story. It's in I don't think Blood, Sweat and Pixels covers Anthem, because I think that's too old of a book. If you really want to read about like insider crap, Blood, Sweat and Pixels is actually a very interesting book. It was written by Jason Schreier. But it'll kind of, like, for example, Doom 3. Doom 3 was actually saved by the team that ported it over to Xbox, because you may not remember this because history changes. And to talk a little bit more about like engines and how they affect us. When they ported it over to console, obviously they couldn't just do a direct port. There's no keyboard and mouse, right? Well, the thing was that allowed them to take some. Doom 3 was universally reviled at that time. Yeah, it had players. I still don't understand people who play games they don't like, but then again, I have a 240 hours in No Man's Sky, so I guess we all have our vices. But yeah, they had Diablo 3 was not well liked, and maybe people forget this because it's well liked now. Well, a big reason for that was when they ported it over to console, they made some changes to the game to make it fun. I would put the emphasis on that. It was because the game wasn't doing well. They wanted to make money, so they just ended up having more leeway to work with this. And so they added some features to the game that people liked, and the console side at least. and they ended up backporting those changes to the PC version. And that was also they then were, if I remember correctly, they were then given the reins over the project. It had like the Warlock or the Witch King. I don't remember. It's been a very long time. I also don't like Diablo 3 very much. I have beaten it several times, but the joke I always make, and this is 100% true, is it's a game I've played with all my girlfriends because it's this mindless game you can play together. It's it's not difficult, it's not fun, but it takes up time and it's co-op. So I would rather play No More Room in Hell. That's if I'm gonna play a co-op game, that's the game I like to play. What about you? What's your co-op game?
What?
If you had to play a co-op game, what are you gonna play?
I was actually going to get what's it called? I forgot what it's called. It released recently. It's like a really cool game.
I mean,
It Takes Two. Yeah, It Takes Two.
Oh yeah. I mean,
that reminds me so much of Little
and that actually was built for literal couples to play, so that's good. Although I've heard that if you're having kind of a weakness in your relationship, it might be a rough ride because it does touch on some heavier topics. It's not just like a mom and a dad find their way to victory. Instead, it's got some more stuff going on. But yeah, all the people I've heard that played it, they enjoyed it. I have not played it, surprisingly.
It's probably one of the more innovative games I've seen.
Snipper Clips is the other one that I like playing co-op. You can only play it once, unfortunately. It's like Portal. You can only play it once, but it's super fun the first time you play it.
I should never finish Portal because I get stuck on a puzzle, and I looked up the solution, and it just didn't work. It just didn't work. I didn't have like the portal surface where it was supposed to be. It just didn't exist there. I couldn't progress.
It was like when life gives you lemons. I turned the game off. I just
give up. I finished Portal. I saw someone finish Portal, so it's okay.
Yeah. See. Well, anyways, we are at the hour and 10 mark. So there's our meandering podcast for this week. Hopefully somebody will have found it fun. I don't know if it'll be super informative, but I guess that's what these podcasts sometimes are for, is just two people to yuck. Anyways, I've been Hyomoto. And he's been Julien. His mic broke is what we're going to go with. Anyways, we'll see y'all next time. Have a great day.